Hey everyone, Tony D with another, let's call this one a hot take, I guess. This is a hot take on why I'm a libertarian. So, I know lots of people make these videos and people make fun of me or make fun of libertarians because of their beliefs, but for the most part, people don't really understand libertarianism and the way it works. They ascribe a lot of fringe elements to us and our crazy belief system. But I'll try to keep this short. Basically, libertarianism is based on the concept of the NAP, the NAP, which is the non-aggression principle. You don't commit aggression against someone unless it's in response to aggression against you. So, if someone breaks into your house, it's okay to initiate aggression against them because they broke into your house. We're also big on private property rights. We believe, in private property, people should own property, and that should be protected by the state. Now, a lot of people think we're anarchists and we don't believe in the state. That's not true. We want a small government, one that protects our property rights and keeps the playing field level for business. We don't want a really invasive government that's constantly regulating everything. We want one that just goes in there and tweaks things when it gets out of hand. That's a difficult balance to strike, obviously, and I think practical libertarians like myself realize that even though we believe in these things, we also have to acknowledge that not everybody else is going to believe in these things, and so what we end up is with some sort of compromise. And what we hope to have happen is, at the very least, we hope to influence the major political parties. And I think to a large extent that's happened in the Republican Party, thanks to people like Ron Paul, to be more libertarian, at least as far as it helps your prospects in getting reelected. So, if you look at the populism of Donald Trump, he acknowledges the endless wars and the waste of money, right? Now, he seems to be at least attempting to get us out of these wars. Hasn't really succeeded too much yet, but the mere fact that he's even trying puts him head and shoulders above recent presidents in that area. And which is why you may see a lot of libertarians for Trump or talk about Trump in a very positive way. You may think, Trump is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I don't, but, I have to acknowledge that the guy is at least aligning with some of my belief system with regards to foreign policy. I would also say the same thing about Tulsi Gabbard. She seems very anti-war and wanting to bring the troops home, even though I would disagree with her on many other issues. When it comes to foreign policy, this is the major one for libertarians. And I think that's another issue too. A lot of people think, all these crazy thoughts, they concentrate on the fringe, beliefs of libertarians, the down the stream results. So yes, libertarians do eventually want a system in which we're free to do whatever we want as long as we're not hurting anybody. So we should be free to have a machine gun and hookers and cocaine and whatever else we want as long as we're not hurting anybody else. And you may say, oh my God, that's crazy. But, we also realize that's not going to happen and that we'd get some sort of compromise and that there's a priority list of things that the libertarians want to accomplish that makes the beliefs more sensible when you think about it that way. So basically, the first thing, obviously, is our foreign policy. It's very reversible if you get the right kind of president. You need to bring the troops home. The occupation around the world, we have almost 1,000 military bases around the world outside the United States. It's time to close them down and bring the troops home and bring back all those resources and cut the overhead of the military. Now, does that mean we completely withdraw from the world? No. But quite a few bases could be closed. Bases that are essentially there to, for instance, they're not really there to keep Iran in check. They're more really there to be targets if Iran ever attacked, or to stoke the flames of Iran and keep poking them with a stick. Same thing with like bases near, the Russian Federation or any of these other places. They're just, at this point, it's time to withdraw the troops from places like Asia, from places, like South America, and just let local governments fix their own problems. We've been trying to fix problems all over the world for a long time. Most people agree that we shouldn't be the world's policemen, and we wouldn't be if we took these troops home, because there'd be nobody to call if something happened. One of the things is we have troops on the DMZ, and they're essentially held hostage there because we don't have enough of them to like roll in and take over North Korea. And even if we did, they'd still be sitting ducks from all the guns that are pointed at them. So bring the troops home. That's number one. Number two, following very close behind, is to end the drug war. The drug war is extremely costly. It's a failure. I could make all sorts of comparisons to prohibition. The prohibition of drugs is not going anywhere, and the prohibition of prostitution too. All that should be legalized. They are essentially victimless crimes, and the problems associated with those activities can be dealt with through healthcare, through education, and things like that. So we don't need, law enforcement involved in these things. And it ties up the courts. It ties up our law enforcement resources that can be better put to keeping people safe. And it creates a culture of violence, just as Prohibition did in Chicago. So that's number two. Number three, and again, 1, 2, and 3 are all pretty important, but number 3 would be the Federal Reserve. We eventually would love to abolish the Federal Reserve, but the first thing we have to do is figure out what the hell it's into. We've got to audit the Federal Reserve and take a look at it and see what the heck they've been doing, and then respond to that. And then we have to also get in there and slowly dismantle it so that we're not lowering interest rates artificially and creating bubbles. And that would take many years. It would take many years to get us off the Federal Reserve, to get us out of quantitative easing, which is quantitative easing, for those of you who don't know, is basically when they take a bunch of money and just put it in the economy. And what that does is it basically devalues all the money that's in circulation, because nothing backs the US dollar anymore. But at the same time, it allows us to pay a bunch of our bills because we just created a bunch of money. Isn't that wonderful? No, it's not really. In the short term, it kind of is, but in the long term, it hurts us. So quantitative easing has to stop. The Federal Reserve has to be audited and then slowly dismantled. And the various things that they do should be done through Congress. Congress has, over the years, abdicated a lot of their responsibilities, and issuing the currency was one of them. And when they passed that on to the Federal Reserve, which is technically a public-private entity, whatever that means, you essentially gave the banks partial control of the monetary supply. And that is a really stupid idea. I think left and right people would get behind that. So those are the main 3. And really, those 3 big issues, those could consume any 2-term president fully, and you wouldn't even get halfway through the things you would need to do to address all the problems there. But if you did address those problems, and Trump is addressing some of those problems that I've mentioned, that would be great. Now, on to the other stuff. Libertarians want more freedom in general. One of the things we'd like, when it comes to gay marriage, we were and are against the government even being involved in marriage. The government shouldn't be able to define what marriage is to anybody. So you should be married whoever you want, whenever you want to do it, and the rules are totally up to you as far as libertarians are concerned. In terms of private contracts between people and companies, they should be able to be anything as long as both parties know what they're getting into, and they sign a contract with open eyes. Then that's okay about a libertarians. Do whatever you feel. As long as you're not hurting anybody. As long as you now we get into a lot of arguments in the libertarian forums and subreddits about again fringe issues like, well, it's not a totally fringe issue, but pollution. Like, well, how do libertarians handle pollution if all land would eventually be privatized? You'd have these guys who would be polluting things. Well, I think once you address the bigger issues, that is a downstream issue dealing with pollution. And again, you wouldn't have no laws. You would just have very few regulations that would be industry specific. But you could have laws that would say, if you pollute a stream and people downstream, or if you knowingly pollute that, and people downstream get sick or injured by that or have their livelihoods destroyed, well, you would be responsible because you put the lead or mercury or whatever you put in there upstream. I mean, you could have a law like that. I think most people have the common sense that if you got someone in a court of law and said, well, here's the proof, this guy was just dumping toxic waste into the river and I'm downstream for the river and all my fish died, I think that would be a pretty, big case. The problem with all these regulations is when companies follow the regulations and people get hurt anyway, they can then hide behind the regulations and say, well, Your Honor, we followed all the regulations. It's not our fault that those people got hurt. There should be more regulations. And it kind of passes the buck to a non-entity. And, the companies end up not paying a lot of times. So you can't account for every situation. That's why we created this system where your peers would listen and sort of make the judgments. Now, it's not perfect, and it's not always going to give you the right result. Juries give the wrong results all the time, but it's the fairest of the systems that we have. You're never going to get a system in which is applied equally, and creating more and more and more laws that just can't be applied equally isn't helping. When you think about all the laws on the books, your average cop cannot remember a tenth of them. It's just impossible. There's just far too many laws. So they end up enforcing the laws that are selective, that their local municipalities are most worried about, that sometimes people are worried about, but at the end of the day, that means that cop could basically charge you with anything at any time, because if he just comes up with a couple of obscure laws and you happen to be breaking them and he just happens not to like you, off to jail you go. And, there's nothing we can do about it. That's the law. That's the law. So libertarians would like a small amount of laws, ones that would be effectively enforced, and ones that we would all know and all agree to on a regular basis. And there are plenty of laws like that. I mean, obviously everybody's against murder. Everybody's against assault and sexual assault. And nobody wants to get beat up. Nobody wants to get robbed. All those things we can all agree on. When it comes to drugs, people don't agree on that. And that's why those laws should be gone. When it comes to prostitution, not everybody agrees with that. So those laws should be gone. And we could have a simpler, more coherent system. It starts with the Constitution. It doesn't end there, but it's the Constitution is a good document. It's sensible for the most part. Yeah, there's a couple of old things in there, but for the most part, it's totally righteous. And we should all agree on those things as much as we all agree on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights before we change the law. So anyhow, that's why I'm a libertarian. If you'd like to learn more about libertarianism, please visit your local library or just Google the internet, because this is the internet and that's now better than the library. And that's something libertarians would endorse. See how great it is being a libertarian? Anyhow, that's my rant. I'll see you next time.